Okay, welcome back. So let me begin with making a few clarifications. So the notion of value that we have developed, which is the socially necessary abstract labor time, the abstract part of it is probably causing some confusion. So let me just reiterate what that means. So think of different types of concrete labor and think of what is common to those kinds of concrete labor. In a sense, what is common is that they are all forms of human labor. So that might lead us to a physiological understanding of abstract labor, and that is not correct. We should not have a physiological understanding. It is a social category. One way to make this clear is to say that the notion of value only applies to a system of commodity production. What is commodity production? Commodity production is a system where the dominant form of production is organized through exchange. What does that mean? It means that most of the producers privately and independently of each other produce whatever they are producing, and then they come to relate to each other only in the market through the process of exchange. And that will lead us to the notion of commodity fetishism, where the relationship between producers, the human beings, get mediated or submerged under the relationship between the objects. So the notion of value is only relevant to a commodity production system. So value is not a concept that we can use in a feudal society. It is not a concept which we can use in a socialist society. So even in socialist society, of course, the output of a factory will in a sense be exchanged with the output of another factory. But there, production is not organized as commodity production because the output of the two factories will be part of a broader plan. So the producers, the workers, will know that they are producing for society, and that part of what they are producing will go to satisfying the needs of somebody else. That consciousness will not emerge only through the exchange of the product. So value is, yes, human, abstract human labor, but only in the context of commodity production. So we cannot use that concept elsewhere in other modes of production. So only in this kind of context, the output of labor is called a commodity. So if you have a tribal society which is not primarily organized through exchange, if there is some little bit of exchange, then we will not say that that is a commodity. It is better to use these concepts in a circumscribed manner, only within a particular type of society. Now, capitalism will be a form of commodity production, but it is a subset. So you might have commodity production which is not capitalism. Or in other words, capitalism will inherit all the properties of a commodity production system, but it will have something else. And that we will come to when we come to the concept of surplus value. Before that, whatever we are saying is really about this superset, and that will get inherited here. So those are some clarificatory questions with which let us move to the study of the second topic, which is money. So the context of our study is a commodity production system where most of what is produced for exchange, or in other words, production is organized through exchange. So that means that the producers come to relate to each other only when they come to the market with their product and exchange it. So in such a system, the output of labor is a commodity. We have seen that a commodity has value. Now the question is, if there are hundreds of commodities, what social mechanism is available to such a system to express the value contained in each commodity, which is independent of the commodities themselves? And the simple answer is money. So money is the social mechanism that endogenously arises from a commodity exchange system or commodity production system as the social mechanism to express the value contained in commodities, which is independent of different commodities. Now Marx has a three-step argument for demonstrating the emergence of money. So step one is what he calls the elementary form of value. In the elementary form of value, we are just looking at the exchange between two commodities. Let's say we go with the example we have worked with, A and B, and they exchange with each other in this specific ratio, half units of B exchange for A units of 1 unit of A. In this exchange, this position is known as the relative position. So A occupies the relative position and B occupies the equivalent position. So what is the difference? The difference is the commodity that is in the equivalent position is understood to express the value contained in the commodity which is in the relative position. So in this case, B is used to exchange the value contained in A. Why? Because the exchange always implies equal amounts of value on the two sides. So this is the elementary form of value. Now the world of commodities, of course, is not limited to just two commodities. The world of commodities has thousands of commodities. So once we expand the world of commodities which will exchange with each other, then we move from the elementary form of value to the expanded form of value. So in the expanded form of value, the relative position is still occupied by A, but the equivalent position is occupied by all other commodities. So A exchanges for half units of B, exchanges for 3 units of C, exchanges for 5 units of D, and so on. So in this, A occupies the relative position and all other commodities are occupying the equivalent position one by one, which means that the value contained in 1 unit of A can be expressed by either choosing B and then using half units of B, or choosing the commodity C and choosing 3 units of C, or choosing commodity D and choosing 5 units of D. All of them are equal in the sense that they all have the same value, and therefore since they exchange with A, they are also representing the value contained in 1 unit of A. Now this form of exchange is unstable. Why? Because we can flip it around. So instead of A occupying the relative position, we can flip it around to occupy the equivalent position, and all other commodities on the other hand occupying the relative position. So let me do that just by changing this. So this becomes the equivalent position and this becomes the relative position. Now when we flip around the expanded form of value, what we get is the general form of value. So that is step 3 of the argument. That is the general form of value. Now let me remind you what occupies the commodity that occupies the equivalent position is used to express the value of the commodity which is occupying the relative position. So by flipping around the expanded form of value, we have got a commodity which can be used to express the value contained in all other commodities. So this is what is known as the general equivalent. And this precisely is money. So once the general equivalent becomes socially accepted, then we have money. So this is the simple three-step argument to establish that money emerges from within the logic of commodity production. Now this is very different from the neoclassical approach. In the neoclassical approach, there is no such endogenous logic to the emergence of money. One commodity is chosen as the numeraire to express the value in other commodities, but it is an ad hoc procedure. On the other hand, Marx's method allows us to see that when you have commodity exchange, money will automatically emerge. So therefore, commodity exchange and monetary, the presence of money are one and the same thing. You cannot have one with the other, one without the other. I mean, historically, probably yes, there were periods when there was barter, but that would be, conceptually, that would not be very important. I mean, I'm not a historian, so I don't know if there is evidence that there were long stretches of time during which barter existed. I would think no, because once commodity exchange emerges as an important form of organizing production, money will immediately emerge. Now, while this is true, money does have different forms. So if we look at history, we will see that there are different forms of money. So let me keep this here. Money is the socially accepted general equivalent. Marx calls it just the general equivalent or the independent form of value. So money is a form of value. Money is a social device used to express value. It is a form of value. But if we look at history, there are different forms that the general equivalent can take. Of course, following Marx's argument, the primary form that money can take is the commodity. So we do have the commodity money system in existence for a long period of time. It is only in the early 20th century and by the mid 20th century that the capitalist world shifts away from commodity money to a non-commodity money system. Since Marx was writing in the 19th century, and since all capitalist economies used one particular commodity or a set of commodities as the money, most of Marx's writing on money is about a commodity money system. So either gold or silver is what figures in most of his writings on money, because that is the form that money took. Marx did not really see the existence of non-commodity money. Non-commodity money is a form of money which is not a commodity. And what is the key difference? The difference is that when gold functions as money, it is still produced as a commodity. So it is the product of labor just like other commodities. Therefore, units of the gold itself has absorbed a part of the social labor, and that very transparently determines the value of that money commodity. When we move to non-commodity money, a piece of paper or an electronic account starts functioning as money, which is a general equivalent. But it no longer has value because it is no longer created as a commodity and has absorbed the labor of society. So another way to think of this distinction is that this commodity money is a form of money which itself has value in the sense that it has absorbed some productive labor. Non-commodity money in that sense is does not have value, valueless money. Now non-commodity money also has several forms. One form that we have seen a lot is fiat money. So what is fiat money? Fiat money essentially is a symbol for the commodity money. So in Marxist time, there was paper money. And in both England, France, and the US, the state, when it was overstretched because of war expenses, did issue papers which functioned as symbols of the commodity. So this paper money ultimately derived its value from commodities. And there was a link between that. But when we think of the non-commodity money, what we are thinking of is not the fiat, the symbol, deriving its value from the commodity, but it being a symbol on its own without being anchored to any commodity. So the example that I have in mind here is the bank notes, the notes that we carry in our pockets, the currency. This is issued by the central bank of the country. Now, there is no convertibility. So you cannot walk into a central bank office and ask for the equivalent amount in gold or silver. There is no link. So therefore, what Marx talked about was different. That was a paper money, but which rested on a commodity money system. That is different. Here we are talking about fiat money, which is a form of non-commodity money and which has no convertibility to any commodity. The other and primary form of money today is credit money. What is credit money? Credit money is really the liabilities of the banking system. So today, what functions as money are two things: the banknotes, which are the liability of the central bank, and the deposits that we have in our checkable deposits. Those deposits are merely the liabilities of the bank where we have held our deposit. Now the banks issue those liabilities to finance assets that they hold, and it is through the difference between those interest rates that they make money. We are going to talk about that later. But it is important to know that that is the primary form of money today. And that has no link whatsoever to any commodity. Therefore, what is important is what money is, not the form it takes. So it can take either a commodity form or a fiat money form or credit money form, which is just accounts in the bank, the commercial banking system. What is important is that whenever we have a commodity system, there has to be a general equivalent which is socially accepted as the means of expressing value produced or contained in commodities, and that function can be fulfilled either by a commodity or a non-commodity money system. Okay, so now that we have introduced money, we can introduce two more concepts. So far we have not really talked about price. So now that we have introduced money, we can talk about price. So the price of any commodity is the amount of money required to purchase that commodity. So the notion of price only will make sense once we have money in the picture, and that's why we first discuss the emergence of money and then we define the notion of a price. After that, we want to define an important concept called the melt. So MELT stands for monetary expression of labor time. So MELT is an important concept. In a way, it is a central concept of the labor theory of value. Now, in the labor theory of value, there has been a lot of debates about an issue that was important in volume 3, which is calculation of prices of production. So there was a whole criticism that emerged in the late 19th century saying that Marx had made an error, which is true, but also that the error was fatal and that his whole conceptual structure would fall once you corrected the error. So there is a very long debate on what is this is known as the transformation problem, how to deal with it. In the late 70s, Duncan Foley and another French economist, Gérard Duménil, independently proposed an interpretation of the labor theory of value in which the monetary expression of labor time and the value of labor power, which we will talk about in the next topic, figure as important concepts. And once you define these quantities properly, lot of those issues that relate to the transformation problem really just goes away. In a way, what they do is define a consistent set of accounts within which we can use the labor theory of value to think about the real world. So in that context, the notion of the monetary expression of labor time is important. So to define the monetary expression of labor time, let us take all the final goods and services. So what are the final goods and services? So those goods and services which do not figure as input into another production process. So those goods and services, let us call the final goods and services, which will not be used as inputs into another production process. Let's take all the final goods and services, take their prices, multiply it with their quantities produced. What we get here is what economists today call the GDP. Now, what we have here is a monetary representation of the total value added created in the production process. One way to see that is to count up all the final goods and services, take their prices, multiply by quantity, and then sum them up across all final goods and services. Another way to think about this is to take each production process and at each step look at the value added, which is the difference between the value of output minus the value of the non-labor inputs. If we take that difference, we will call that the value added. If we take all production processes, add up the value added, we will get the same quantity. So therefore, the GDP is also the total value added created in the production process and expressed in monetary terms. So let's say these are expressed in rupees. Now let us go to the other side of the production process, which is labor. Let us say we are able to count up the total units of productive labor. Now, when we are doing this, we will make all those qualifications that we have thought about. We are trying to count up the total productive labor. So therefore, when we count up total productive labor, we will count up complex labor as multiples of simple labor and then add them up. And we will only look at the socially necessary labor. And we will only look at social labor, not private labor. Suppose we have done that, then we will get this quantity in terms of hours. Now, the key claim of the labor theory of value is that these two quantities are the same thing but expressed in different units. The total value added created in a period is just a monetary expression of the total productive labor expended in production. That is the key claim of the labor theory of value. Now notice, this claim is at the aggregate level. We are not saying that this equivalence holds at the level of individual commodities. In fact, for individual commodities, the price and the value added or the productive labor that goes into its production will be different. In general, the price and value of individual commodities will be different. They will not be equivalent. So the labor theory of value is often interpreted as suggesting that for each commodity, the labor theory of value says that the price should be proportional to the value. That is not what the labor theory of value says. That is one of the first mistakes. That is what Ricardo said. That is not what Marx said. Marx's theory is only valid, is only making the equivalence at the aggregate level. And to make this equivalence, you need this. Because this is expressed in rupees, this is expressed in hours. How can you add apples and oranges? So what you do is define an exponent called the monetary expression of labor time, which allows you to convert hours of labor into rupees of value added. So the monetary expression of labor time for the Indian economy for say 2016 will be the GDP of the Indian economy expressed in rupees divided by the total productive labor time expressed in hours. Now, Marx implicitly used this all the time in volume 1 of Capital. So in many calculations, he has used this without actually explicitly defining it. So if you want textual evidence, there is a lot. So he often assumes, let us assume 1 hour of labor is equal to 6 shillings. That is precisely what he is doing. He is converting hours to labor, hours to a monetary unit. What Foley and Dumenil did is flesh out and put at the center of the labor theory of value this kind of conversion, saying that for any economy, for a given period of time, we can always define this kind of an exponent, which is the ratio of the monetary value added and the total labor time. Therefore, what this will allow us to do is to do the following things. It is allowing us to maintain the equivalence between total labor time and total monetary value added at the aggregate level. Therefore, it allows for the deviation between prices and values at the individual level. Secondly, once we have calculated this for any economy, and we can do that for any economy, we will be freely able to move between quantities denominated in hours, social labor time, and rupees to social labor time. So let's look at an example. So let's say the GDP of the US economy in some year is $10 trillion. And the total productive labor time is 1 trillion hours. So in this economy, the monetary expression of labor time is GDP divided by the productive labor time, which comes out to $10 per hour. So what does this say? This is saying that for this particular economy, each hour of socially necessary abstract labor time is expressed in 10 units of the monetary, 10 units of dollars, or 10 monetary units, which means that if we are given 100 hours, we can convert it to dollar terms using the melt, because each hour is worth $10. 100 hours will give us $1,000. Similarly, if we have a quantity in terms of dollars, let's say $500, then we can convert it to hours. We can convert it to hours of social labor time. So in this case, it will be 50. So once we define the monetary expression of labor time, we get to assert the key equivalence that defines the labor theory of value at the aggregate level, and we are able then to move freely between quantities denoted in hours, social labor time hours, and the monetary unit, and vice versa. Now, this also means that it opens up the possibility of divergence between the price and value of individual commodities.
Is this also a way of converting simple labor to complex labor or vice versa?
No, when we find out total productive labor time, we are implicitly reducing all complex labor to units of simple labor, and only then, so this 1 trillion is units of simple labor, yes. So that conversion is 1 hour of social labor, which is the simple labor, yes.
Suppose we know that the socially necessary labor time for producing mobile phones is 10, and by this calculation we will say that 10 into 10, so therefore the value is 100. However, we said that defining value for the mobile phone, we will only take into account the average of people working in mobile phones. But defining the melt, we have taken the total productive labor time producing mobiles, producing paper cups, etc. So
right. So that's what I'm coming to next. So let's take a commodity. So let's take the mobile phone. Now this has two things. One is the socially necessary labor time that is necessary to produce this, which we have called the value, which is denoted in terms of hours. On the other hand, the commodity has a price. The price is expressed in terms of, let's say, dollars. Now we know that given any quantity of dollars, we can convert it to the social equivalence in terms of labor hours. So if we divide the price by the monetary expression of labor time, we will get the social labor time equivalence of the price. And there is no necessity that these two will be equal. This is very important, because many people think that what we are saying, what the labor theory of value is saying, is that this and this is equal. So let me write this. This is the social labor time equivalence of the price. Now this is a very different quantity than the value. The value is computed from the production conditions. Given the technology and the average intensity of labor, how much labor time is required to produce that commodity, that gives us the value. Now in the market, we see that it exchanges for a sum of money, which is what we call the price. Now given the price, and once we have the melt, we can convert it to social labor time equivalence. So when we are buying that commodity, what we are getting is the social labor time equivalence of the amount of money represented by the price. And that can in general be different from the value. In fact, in volume 3 we will see that Marx makes an argument why this will necessarily be different. And therefore, from the beginning, we need not say that the labor theory of value asserts this equivalence at the individual level. So, by defining the melt, we retain the key insight of the labor theory of value, that value is created by labor. But that equivalence we only hold at the level of the aggregate commodity production system, which allows individual values and prices to deviate. So this is very, very important. Yes.
I was not able to fully understand in the production of the GDP here at the aggregate level itself. So suppose there is this brand called Levi's. Now Levi's jeans production costs only, I am talking about an individual commodity, I know, but in calculation of the total GDP, that will also come there. So say suppose the production of a Levi's jeans costs only 150 rupees, but it is sold in the market at 3,000 rupees, and that does not represent the value or the social labor time equivalent. So how, if that is there in the GDP, that will also come into melt and the other equivalent. So how do you
Yes, no, that's a great question. So when I'm talking of GDP, it will not be the standard way that is GDP is calculated by mainstream economists. What you're referring to is the distinction between productive labor and unproductive labor. We will come to that distinction later. Here, what I mean by GDP is after we have made decisions to identify sectors and activities which add value, we will only count those sectors and activities. For instance, we will not count the so-called value added of the financial sector. We will not count the value added in the trade sector. So, but right now I am abstracting from that difference, distinctions, and let us assume that we have a way of narrowing down to activities that just add value. Now, if we just narrow down to those sets of activities, then their prices, it is valid to include here because there might be redistribution of value within those. So it is possible that Levi's is sold at a price which is much higher than its value, but that will only mean that some other commodity will lose value. So we will preserve the equivalence at the aggregate level by allowing this transfer between commodities to happen. And in volume 3, that is one of the key arguments that we will see. And let me give you a quick version of the argument. If we look at production of different things, there are some things which are very capital intensive, which require a lot of machinery per unit of labor. Other things require much less machinery. Now, those things which require less machinery use much more labor. Labor creates value. So, per unit of dollar or rupee invested in the two production lines, the second one creates much more value. Now, if I am a capitalist, I will have to be ensured the same average rate of profit no matter where I invest. That will only be possible if the price at which this commodity, which has much more value, is sold at a price which is much below its value. And the commodity which has much little value is sold at. So there is a way in which value gets transferred between commodities. So we can allow for what you are saying. But you are pointing to an important question. So we will have to somehow narrow down to the sectors which create value. And in calculation of GDP, we cannot count the so-called value added of the non-productive sectors. That's a question we will come to later, but not now. But that's a very important point, yes.
In calculating for total productive labor, can you just elaborate on the question of depreciation of machinery and raw material use that year?
No, there is no machinery, and so okay, let me go back. What we are saying is that we are looking at the net output. So the net output means the gross output minus the depreciation. So we have already removed the depreciation.
And raw materials also.
And the raw materials. So we are only looking at the net output created, which gives us an idea of the total value added. If we just look at net output, or if we look at the total output of only the final goods, either way we will get value added. So that takes care of the depreciation. Okay, now let me make one last point about this aggregate nature of the labor theory of value, and then we will move on to surplus value and capital. So the interpretation of the labor theory of value that I am proposing comes from the work of Duncan Foley and Gerard Dumenil, and one of the key components of this interpretation is to understand the labor theory of value at the aggregate level. So what the labor theory of value is telling us is to look at the total productive labor of society and look at the total monetary value added in all the commodities produced. And what the labor theory of value is saying is that these two are just two different ways of counting the same thing. And the way to do that counting is to define the melt. So the melt allows us to freely convert between these quantities. This is measured in hours, this is measured in dollar, and to preserve the equivalence at this aggregate level, which allows the difference between price and value at every individual level of commodity. So this is really an important point of this interpretation of the labor theory of value, which helps solve a lot of problems that come later with the labor transformation problem and all that. Okay. So let me summarize what we have studied so far. We started out with the commodity. We saw that a commodity is the product of labor in a commodity producing system, which is a kind of tautology. What I'm saying is that the product of labor in a society where production is organized through exchange is a commodity. That commodity has a value in the specific sense that that commodity has absorbed a part of the total labor of society. That value is created by the socially necessary abstract labor time. Since commodities have value, endogenously a system emerges to express the value in every commodity, and that is money. Money is the independent form of value, or the general equivalent. Initially it emerges as one commodity, separating out from the world of commodities and functioning as money, but over time we have seen that we can move away from a commodity money system to a non-commodity money system. It can be fiat or credit money. And lastly, we have defined this important concept, the melt, which is the ratio of the total value added divided by the total productive labor time, which is the key way in which we are asserting the equivalence of total labor and monetary value added as the key proposition of the labor theory of value. And it allows us to move between monetary units and labor units, and it allows us to have commodities with prices and values diverging from each other. Okay. So the next topic is surplus value.